Greetings and salutations, my fellow sovereigns. My name is Zen, and I am the headmaster of the Vocational Science of Freedom. The Vocational Science of Freedom is an online community dedicated to freedom and sovereignty for the American people. The Vocational Science of Freedom mission statement is as follows: to perpetuate and grow a community of free sovereign people that create, learn, and teach a complete and innovative curriculum of American civics, coupled with autodidactic learning in the quadrants of self-awareness, self-governance, self-defense, and self-reliance, for the betterment, freedom, and perpetual sovereignty of we, the American people. If you'd like to join the Vocational Science of Freedom on Odyssey, YouTube, and Gab, and on the Gilded server, you can do so with these links. These links are always provided in the show notes on Odyssey and YouTube. The Gilded server is the server that we use to hold class on, and it has over 300 people that share their learning, their stories, their research, and the news with everyone else. Gilded also has a voice and video conferencing capacity, as well as document sharing. It's much like an advanced version of Skype, but it is anonymous. And so the lecture that I'll be giving today is also posted on the Vocational Science of Freedom Odyssey and YouTube channels. So, tonight's discussion is going to be about the Luciferian global agenda, with focus on a man called Edward Mandel House. And so to start off, my philosophy regarding all of this is that no one rules if no one obeys. And that's the very problem with what's going on. Everybody is just obeying decrees from the Luciferian globalists without ever looking into or learning if they actually have to, meaning if their quote-unquote laws actually apply to you or not. And I'm also well aware of the fact that every battle is won before it's fought. All the information and remedy that I will be giving tonight, and that's also on the VSOF, Odyssey, and YouTube channels, is to be understood to prepare you before you get into a fight with these evil Luciferian fools that want to enslave you. Now, the extent to which you prepare for battle can differ depending on your will and your skill. This would be an example of a higher end of this sort of preparation. This is what I am prepared to do if need be, but I'd rather not have to. And if none of you are aware of what this is, simply go online and look up Killdozer and read the story. This is what happens when you push self-respecting, resourceful men to the brink and then push them over it. So the question is, should we not first prepare for battle by learning about the enemy, their ideas, concepts, methods, tactics, and learn the truth of what is going on? After all, the globalists have come back over the top of all of us after 1776 by superior insight, deception, and a war on the truth. So, should we not have the capacity and intellect to stop them without having to resort to this level of physical force? I would say that we do. We have that capacity, and we must learn how to harness it. And the way that we should learn how to harness it is the use of the Trivium. When anyone wants to learn any specific concept or remedy, the first thing everyone needs to learn is how to learn. This requires learning of the Trivium. So, what is the Trivium? The Trivium is grammar, logic, and rhetoric. It is the first three of the 7 liberal arts. Grammar is the who, what, when, and where. Your who is the entities, the what is the transpired events, the when is the time that they took place, and the where is their location. Your vocabulary words and your correct use of words by learning the definitions prevents one from suffering from the fallacy of citicism. And citicism is the automatic speech without thought of the meaning of the words spoken. You might hear a lot of people say the words freedom, democracy, free speech, and justice, but without them ever having looked them up and actually knowing what these words mean, they are no different than a parrot. The parrot doesn't know what the word democracy means, and if you do not go look up these words, you do not know what they mean either. So from grammar, then we get logic. So your grammar is your who, what, when, where. This is the knowledge of a situation. Logic is the why. And logic develops the faculty of reason and establishes valid, non-contradictory relationships among facts. This is understanding. And then rhetoric is the how, the application of knowledge and understanding, which brings wisdom. This is coherent expression of our conclusions. So, the trivium consists of grammar, logic, and rhetoric. The quadrivium consists of mathematics, geometry, which is mathematics in space, music, which is mathematics in time, and astronomy, which is mathematics in space and time. And so the system is 1, discovering and arranging a body of knowledge under general grammar, getting your who, what, when, where correct. Fully understanding that knowledge under formal logic, without contradictory relationships. And then 3, wisely expressing that knowledge and understanding under classical rhetoric. Now that we have a full virus scanner, basically, of how to use our brain, now we can start beginning to learn the who, what, when, where, and how of our enemies and their agenda against us. I'm well aware that all government, and particularly this slavery system, this flavor of it, is basically ready to go at you every different which way they can. And most agents of government come at you head on. They demand from you up front what they want of you. The shadow government, on the other hand, attacks you from behind. So the only way to win against an enemy is to learn everything you can about that enemy. If you do not know your enemy, you have no right to put yourself on the battlefield, because your lack of knowledge will put you and others into unnecessary danger, and that will lead to your defeat. Most people think they know what the United States government is, and most of them would be wrong. My understanding is that there is no legitimate de jure government any longer. What you have are secret societies that are interlocked and working together to take over the entire world. And they are hiding in plain sight. Doing things like this, which, by the way, is a top-down view of the Capitol in Washington, D.C., is called the ritualistic mocking of the victim. Now, does anyone know what that is? It's an owl. And it is the same owl that is in the upper right-hand corner of every single $1 bill. It is a representation of the demon goddess Lilith, and is represented through history as an owl, and it is an aspect of the dark feminine. The aspect of the dark feminine of Lucifer is one of the ancient pagan gods that these people worship. There is much more that I could say about this topic, but if you want to learn more about it, I would suggest watching Mark Passio's lectures on the dark feminine, where he covers the subject in far greater detail. So, why is there an owl layout in the Washington, D.C. city structure? Because there are 2 federal governments, and one of them very few people know anything about. One of them is de jure and one of them is de facto. The definition of government de facto is a government of fact, a government actually exercising power and control, as opposed to the true and lawful government, a government not established according to the Constitution of the nation, or not lawfully entitled to recognition or supremacy, but which has nevertheless supplanted or displaced the government de jure. A government deemed unlawful or deemed wrongful or unjust, which nevertheless receives presently habitual obedience from the bulk of the community. Now, in case there was any doubt as to the fact that there are 2 separate national governments, this is a court case of Downs versus Bidwell in 1901. And this is the dissenting opinion from Justice John Harlan. Quote, "The idea prevails with some, indeed it has expression in arguments at the bar, that we have in this country substantially 2 national governments. One to be maintained under the Constitution, with all its restrictions. The other to be maintained by Congress, outside and independently of that instrument, by exercising such powers as other nations of the earth are accustomed to." Now, what he means by that is being ruled by Roman civil law. "I take leave to say that if the principles thus announced should ever receive the sanction of a majority of this court, a radical and mischievous change in our system will result. We will, in that event, pass from an era of constitutional liberty, guarded and protected by a written constitution, into an era of legislative absolutism. It will be an evil day for American liberty if the theory of a government outside the supreme law of the land finds lodgment in our constitutional jurisprudence. No higher duty rests upon this court than to exert its full authority to prevent all violation of the principles of the Constitution. Now, from the standpoint of there being two different national governments, in the folder for this class, which I have posted a link to in the Gilded server and will also be in the show notes for the class, there's more information that you can learn about this. Specifically, you can also go to usa-versus-us.info, and which is fully archived on the VSOF mega folder for the classes. And I also suggest that everyone also read USA, the Republic is the House that no one lives in. That particular paper we've been reading for consecutive nights and will be posted eventually in its entirety as a part of a series which will be in the playlist for both Odyssey and maybe YouTube. And also I would suggest reading T.J. Henderson's book on this subject as well. So, the fact that there are two national governments is clearly known, but there is also the aspect that there are three city-states. And they are as follows. First, the City of London. The City of London is not a part of England, and it was set up in 43 AD, and is still to this day a separate city-state, which the royal family members must ask permission to enter. Vatican City is a separate city-state, and is not any part of Italy, and it controls the religious organizations of the world. Washington, D.C. is not any part of America, and it is a separate city-state and is the seat of the United States Federal Corporation and the center of the Luciferian New World Order military dominance. The filth of this world and those that control it go back thousands of years, and their goal is terror, pain, agony, deprivation of rights, and life. This is because they worship depravity and evil for the glory of Lucifer. As George Lincoln Rockwell once said, it is not the evil itself which is horrifying about our times. It is the way we not only tolerate evil, but have made a cult of positively worshiping weakness, depravity, rottenness, and evil itself. The reason why the Luciferian filth are winning right now is because of your ignorance. And as for the great inventor and scientist Nikola Tesla once said, of all the frictional resistances, the one that most retards human movement is ignorance. Your ignorance is what I intend to rectify to the extent that I am able to do so this evening. Because the only good is knowledge, and the only evil is ignorance. And as I have shown, the best way to remove that ignorance is to apply the Trivium to every subject that you wish to master. Now, who is your enemy, and what is their agenda against you? Your enemies are the Luciferian globalist / world communists and anyone who supports their agenda. They are also referred to as the Khazarian mob. And if you'd like more information about who the Khazarian mob is, I highly suggest that you go to Veterans Today archives and look up the document called The Hidden History of the Incredibly Evil Khazarian Mafia. That document is also available in the folder for this class. Now, who are they? They would include, but not be limited to, every Luciferian banking family member. As Ezra Pound once said, no Rothschild is English. No Brock, Morgenthau, Cohen, Lehman, Warburg, Kuhn, Kahn, Schiff, Schief, or Solomon was ever born Anglo-Saxon. And it is for this filth that you fight. It is for this filth that murdered your empire. It is this filth that selects your politicians. Now, who are some of the other who are as follows. Every single order follower who protects the Luciferian globalists supports and perpetuates their evil. I don't care what level they may be at. It may be the lowliest security person, or it may be the President of the United States. It doesn't matter. Every attorney who seeks to put you in a cage for a crime without a harm or a damaged party is also part of them. Every politician who seeks to make a profit from your productive value. Every Mason who protects the Luciferians and enforces their agenda on the American people. And everyone who controls the politicians, which are people like Henry Kissinger, Zbigniew Brzezinski, Anthony Fauci, and Edward Mandel House, who we will get to shortly. This is a quote from David Spangler, who is United Nations Director of Planetary Initiative, Lucius Trust member, Lucius as in Lucifer, a Freemason, and an outspoken Luciferian. Quote, "No one will enter the New World Order unless he or she will make a pledge to worship Lucifer. No one will enter the New Age unless he will take a Luciferian initiation. And what that means is that they will compromise you. They will put you in some sort of position of which you will go through an initiation, and once you do that, then you will be controlled." So, on to Edward Mandel House. Who was Edward Mandel House? This is a snippet from Wikipedia. Edward Mandel House was born July 26, 1858, and died March 28, 1938. Was a known American diplomat and an advisor to President Woodrow Wilson. He was known as Colonel House, although his rank was honorary and he had performed no military service. He was a highly influential backstage politician in Texas before becoming a key supporter of the presidential bid for Wilson in 1912. Having a self-effacing manner, he did not hold office but was an quote-unquote executive agent. Wilson's chief advisor on European politics and diplomacy during World War I, which ran from 1914 to 1918, and he became a governmental official as one of the 5 American commissioners to the Paris Peace Conference in 1919. In 1919, Wilson broke with House and many other top advisors, believing they had deceived him at Paris. Well, the deception started long before the Paris Peace Conference. In short, Edward Mandel House was Woodrow Wilson's handler for the Luciferian bankers, and he was appointed by them, meaning House, to watch over Wilson and make him do their bidding, as in signing the Federal Reserve Act in 1913. Now, as a caveat to what I'm about to read, I'm not sure for 100% that the quote is actually from House or not. There are people who have looked at it and looked for it and are still trying to find its original document. However, I will say this. Even if it's not real, or if it is and somebody destroyed it or occulted it in some way, that's not really what's relevant. What is relevant is what it says about the current system and how this system of slavery operates. These facts within this quote we can prove, and we will look up all of the important words in law in this document to give a clear picture of what the Luciferian globalist agenda is against us. And after all, the science fiction book Starship Troopers is studied in war colleges in America, and it is a work of fiction. So, if the quote is authentic from House to Wilson or not, it does not alter the truth of what is written within. So, with that, I will read the entire quote, and then we will basically field strip down the entire quote to its individual words and concepts using the Trivium, which are all of the words that are underlined. So, Edward Mandel House had this to say in a letter to Woodrow Wilson. Very soon, every American will be required to register their biological property in a national system designed to keep track of the people, and that will operate under the ancient system of pledging. By such methodology, we can compel people to submit to our agenda, which will affect our security as a chargeback for our fiat paper currency. Every American will be forced to register or suffer, not being able to work and earn a living. They will be our chattel, and we will hold the security interest over them forever by operation of the law merchant, under the scheme of secured transactions. Americans, by unknowingly or unwittingly, delivering the bills of lading to us will be rendered bankrupt and insolvent, forever to remain economic slaves through taxation, secured by their pledges. They will be stripped of their rights and given a commercial value, designed to make us a profit, and they will be none the wiser. For not one man in a million could ever figure out our plans. And, if by accident, one or two would figure it out, we have in our arsenal plausible deniability. After all, this is the only logical way to fund government, by floating liens and debt to the registrants in the form of benefits and privileges. This will inevitably reap to us huge profits beyond our wildest expectations and leave every American a contributor to this fraud, which we will call social insurance, which was eventually called Social Security. Without realizing it, every American will insure us for any loss we may incur, and in this manner, every American will unknowingly be our servant, however begrudgingly. The people will become helpless and without any hope for their redemption. And we will employ the high office of the president of our dummy corporation to foment this plot against America. So, now we will break this down word by word. And every underlined word will be the words that we will be looking up. Also, to make a note here, the BL letters and BLDs, these have specific references to specific legal dictionaries. The code, or the index, if you will, is located in the show notes, but just to state them quickly, TDB stands for Thompson's Dictionary of Banking. BLD stands for Bouvier's Law Dictionary. Webster obviously means Webster's Dictionary. And then BL and the number stands for whatever version of Black's Law it is. So I will make sure to make a point of that when we go through each and every one of these words. Okay, so very soon every American will be required to register their biological property. Okay, register, verb, Black's Law Dictionary 9th. 1. To enter a public registry, to register a new car. And whenever you see this greater than and less than symbol in the Black's Law, it is an example of how to use the word. So when you register something, you're putting it into a registry. So let's look at register from Bouvier's Law Dictionary. Common law, the certificate of registry granted to the person or persons entitled thereto by the collector of the district comprehending the port to which any ship or vessel shall belong, more properly, the registry itself. For the form, requisites a certificate of registry. Right? You're talking about maritime admiralty law there, about the registration of ships. Well, this is what they're doing. They've brought admiralty law onto the land, and they're now using what used to only be subject to maritime admiralty, meaning ships and shipping. They're now having everyone register under this same system. So if you register something, what does that make you? It makes you a registrant. Black's Law 7th, registrant. One who registers, especially one who registers something for the purpose of securing a right or privilege granted by law upon official registration. So what's a privilege? Bouvier's Law Dictionary. Rights. This word, taken its active sense, is a particular law or a particular disposition of the law which grants certain special prerogatives to some persons contrary to common right. That's important to understand that. Contrary to common right. If you hold a rock in your hand, you have a common right to it. It's yours. Your piece of property. But they're saying a privilege. So a registrant gets a privilege, which by grant gives them special prerogatives to some persons contrary to the common right of the original owner. So, to make a point, a right is something inherent in you. A privilege is something that is granted to you from another. And I highly suggest that everyone watch the lecture from Michael Badnarik on rights versus privileges. And I've made sure to put that into the mega folder under extra lectures and audio files. It's very short. It's only about 9 minutes. It won't take you too long to go through. So, next, every American will be required to register their biological property. What's property? Black's Law 7th. 1. the right to possess, use, and enjoy a determinate thing, either a tract of land or chattel, the right of ownership. Example, the institution of private property is protected from undue governmental influence. Well, maybe. 2, an external thing over which the rights of possession, use, and enjoyment are exercised. The airport is city property. Property from Bouvier's Law Dictionary. 1, the right and interest which a man has in lands and chattels to the exclusion of others. It is the right to enjoy and dispose of certain things in the most absolute manner as he pleases, provided he makes no use of them prohibited by law. Meaning, yes, you own a firearm, fine. That does not mean that you can go off and murder someone with that firearm. Bouvier's Law Dictionary, and I skipped a few entries here, so it goes from 1 to 6. I just put the most important ones in regarding how they're using the word property here in this sentence. So Bouvier's Law Dictionary 6. But property and personal goods may be absolute or qualified, without any relation to the nature of the subject matter, but simply because more persons than one have an interest in it, or because the right of property is separated from the possession. A bailee of goods, though not the owner, has a qualified property in them, while the owner has the absolute property. And to understand more about that, I would suggest looking up bailee and bailment. By the way, all of these dictionaries that I'll be reading from are all available on the Vocational Science Freedom Mega Online Library. Number 9, Bouvier's Law Dictionary. Property is lost in general in 3 ways. By the act of man, by the act of law, and by the act of God. So, when you go and register something by an act of law, and also by your own act, the act of man, you are giving up a right to have a privilege. So next part of the sentence, and just to reiterate here where we're at, so very soon every American will be required to register their biological property in a national system designed to keep track of the people, and that will operate under the ancient system of pledging. So, what is a pledge? Pledge or pawn. Bouvier's Law Dictionary. Contracts. Sir William Jones defines a pledge to be a bailment of goods by a debtor to his creditor, to be kept until the debt is discharged. Also defined it to be a contract by which a debtor gives to his creditor a thing to detain as security for his debt. So a thing, the things that you are registering, that's the security. Lord Holt's definition is when goods or chattels are delivered to another as a pawn to be security for money borrowed of him by the bailor. Bouvier's Law Dictionary, number 7 of that particular pledge or pawn. Things which are subject of a pledge or pawn are ordinarily things and chattels, but money, negotiable instruments, chooses an action, and yes, that's not a misprint, and indeed any other valuable thing of a personal nature, such as patent rights and manuscripts, may, by the common law, be delivered in pledge. So I'm just making a point here to show you that the Luciferians are a lot of things, but stupid is not one of them. They have figured out a system by which everything that they're doing to you, you ask them to do. It's all by contract, it's all by consent, and none of it is a violation of the common law. To continue, what's a pledge? Bouvier's Law Dictionary. Contracts. He who becomes security for another. And, in this sense, everyone who becomes bail for another is a pledge. Everyone who becomes bail for another is a pledge. So you are pledging your children to the Luciferian globalists when you sign a birth certificate contract and register them on the public rolls. This is very important to understand. This is what they are doing. No one forces you to do this. But when you do it, this is what is happening. So pledge, from Black's Law 9th, noun, a formal promise or undertaking, oath. 2, the act of providing something as security for a debt or obligation. So the biological property, your children, are given as a security and become a pledge to the corporate state for the debts that they have taken on from the Luciferian banking cartel called the Federal Reserve System. This whole system of what they did was finalized at the governor's meeting that took place in 1933 in D.C., wherein the governors of the states pledged all of the registered property on the state level to the feds, meaning Congress, for the loans from the private banks. Because the United States Federal Corporation was bankrupt at that time and needed more collateral. Remember, there was a lot of things that happened in 1933 and around the New Deal time, but one of the most important ones was the fact that the United States was bankrupt. So they needed more collateral. To continue, by such methodology, we can compel people to submit to our agenda, which will affect our security. What's an agenda? Webster's Dictionary. An underlying, often ideological plan or program, a political agenda. What's security? Bouvier's Law Dictionary. That which renders a matter sure, an instrument which renders certain the performance of a contract. The term is also sometimes applied to designate a person who becomes the surety for another, or who engages himself for the performance of another's contract. That's what you're doing. We are being registered. Our bodies, our estates, our property is being registered for the debt that's not ours. It's Congress's debt, the United States Federal Corporation's debt, and they are pledging our registered property for the performance of their debt. That's what's happening. So, security, Black's Law 9th, noun. Collateral given or pledged to guarantee the fulfillment of an obligation, especially the assurance that a creditor will be repaid, usually with interest, any money or credit extended to a debtor. Under an important statutory definition, a security is any interest or instrument relating to finances, including a note, as in a Federal Reserve note, stock, treasury stock, bond, debenture, evidence of indebtedness, or certificate of interest. Securities differ from most other commodities in which people deal. They have no intrinsic value in themselves. They represent rights in something else. A Federal Reserve note has no intrinsic value. It is only a promise to pay. It's a promissory note. And if you look at it, if you look at a Federal Reserve note, you can pull out any of them out of your pocket right now. You will see that they're all signed twice. Why? Well, we'll get to that. But the point is that they're a promissory note. One guy saying to another, hey, this is what I owe you. To continue on, by such methodology, we can compel people to submit to our agenda, which will affect our security as a chargeback for our fiat paper currency. So what's chargeback and what is fiat paper currency? Charge. Bouvier's Law Dictionary, contracts. An obligation entered into by the owner of an estate, which makes the estate responsible for its performance. This is what they're doing in every single private for-profit court. They are charging your estate, which is why the court case, the name of it, is in all capital letters. That's not you, that's your estate, or it's a constructive trust, which they've created by taking some of the res of the estate and putting into it. But we'll get to that later. So, an obligation binding upon him who enters into it, right? Because like you enter into court, which may be removed or taken away by a discharge. You get charged, you get a discharge. What's fiat? Bouvier's Law Dictionary, practice. An order of a judge or of an officer whose authority to be signified by his signature is necessary to authenticate the particular acts. Fiat money. Black's Law 9th. paper currency not backed by gold or silver, also termed fiat money. Now, my thoughts on this are as follows. I personally see the chargeback that they're speaking of here to be the fees for the commercial crimes listed in the statutes, acts, ordinances, and codes. So the breakdown is you give them a security, your children, and they issued a debt on that security, the Federal Reserve notes. You use that debt, the notes, and you use the collateral pledged for the debt, meaning your own body and your children's body, in a manner that is against the Roman civil law statutes. Therefore, you owe them a chargeback in the form of the fees and fines imposed upon you by the Roman civil law courts, because you do not hold allodial title to the res of the estate. You are only granted the right of use, right? That privilege that we spoke of earlier. Only are granted right of use of the res of the estate. And by the way, the term res, R-E-S, means a thing. So anything of the estate. And the substantive definition of the word estate means everything that a man or woman owns in law. So your cups, your silverware, your motorcycle, those are all res of your entire gross estate. So to continue here, you only are granted the right of use of the res of the estate, and that privilege of use is conditional and comes with a duty not to damage or use the res in a way that they determined for you in the Roman civil law statutes. Say, example, like deciding to put cannabis in your body, or to have an Amanita muscaria mushroom, or any other drug which they outlaw. It's your body, you own it. If you choose to destroy it or you choose to alter it in any way, shape, or form, that's your right. Another way to say it is this. You pledged your children, no one came back to make a claim upon them, to therefore have redemption of them. So the property, children, are now abandoned by presumption at the Foundling Hospital. They then put the res, your body or your children's body, into a constructive trust. They then presume that you are the acting trustee of that constructive trust and proceed to fine and fee the hell out of you for the misuse of that property, your body, for the rest of your life. I suggest watching How Your Estates Are Stolen by Fraud at Your Birth, Part 1 and 2, and they are on the VSOF YouTube channel. I did a very extensive talk about this, which started out as a long email to someone explaining what was going on, but eventually I did a 2-part talk on it, and I explain all of this in much more detail there. So, next, they will be our chattel, and we will hold the security interest over them forever. Chattels. Bouvet's Law Dictionary, property. 1. A term which includes all kinds of property except the freehold or things which are parcel of it. Meaning, a freehold is an aspect of land, so when they say except for the freehold or things which are parcel of it, they're talking about things like a tree, something that's connected to that land. It is a more extensive term than goods or effects. Now get this. Debtors taken in execution, captives, apprentices, are accounted chattels. A captive is considered a chattel. So if they've captured you, or you have registered your body, or more to the point, your parents registered your body, and you have never gone back and claimed your estate, which your body is part of, then you are then sitting in execution for someone else's debt, Congress's. 2. Chattels are personal or real. Personal are such as belonging immediately to the person of a man. Chattels real are such as either appertain not immediately to the person, but to something by way of dependency, as a box with the title deeds of lands, or such as are issuing out of some real estate as a lease of lands or term of years, which passes personally to the executor of the owner. The executor of the owner. You are presumed to be dead. The importance of you creating a document and putting it onto the public record, which is part of the Vocational Science of Freedom status docs, to appoint yourself as executor of your estate is a critical part It's a critical wall that you have to put up, a critical defense against the presumptions of these Luciferian scumbags. Because they have to recognize the appointment of a lawful executor. Because the difference between an executor and an administrator is vast. An executor is one that is appointed by will. An administrator is one that is appointed to administer in a state that is what's called intestate, or without a will. So when you become the proper executor and you file the documents, you can use that executor appointment to tell them to fuck off, because they cannot cross the executor. That's the importance of it. So, to continue, chattels. Black's Law ninth, usually plural. Movable or transferable property, personal property, especially a physical object capable of manual delivery, and not the subject matter of real property, meaning land. What's a security interest? Black's Law ninth, a property interest created by agreement or by operation of law, right, registration, to secure performance of an obligation, especially repayment of a debt. Again, Congress's debt. Although the UCC limits the creation of a security interest to personal property, the Bankruptcy Code defines the term to mean a lien created by an agreement. So what's that agreement? It's that registration again. On to the next. By operation of the law merchant under the scheme of secured transactions. So what's the law merchant? Bouvier's Law Dictionary, a system of customs acknowledged and taken notice of by all commercial nations, and those customs constitute a part of the general law of the land, and being a part of that law, their existence cannot be proved by witness. How convenient. But the judges are bound to take notice of them ex officio. See Keynes' Lex Mercatoria, Americana. And every time you see Lex Mercatoria, that's literally the law merchant in Latin. So there are books written about the law merchant in America. Why is this important? What is the law merchant? So I'll break this down. The law merchant, being a system of customs, are the customs of merchants, being the aspect of most of where you get a lot of the maritime admiralty law and a lot of the things that happen at ports. I won't get into all of it, but basically when a ship comes into port and all the paperwork that has to go on with it, so on and so forth. That's part of customs, which is where we get the term customs office. That's where it comes from. So these commercial customs are the law merchant, and they're an aspect and part of the common law of merchants, right? But they're technically from the sea. The customs are. So just to explain that. Next, commercial law. Black's Law ninth, the substantive law dealing with the sale and distribution of goods, the financing of credit transactions, and the security of goods sold and negotiable instruments. Most American commercial law is governed by the Uniform Commercial Code, also termed mercantile law. Although the term commercial law is not a term of art in American law, it has become synonymous in recent years with the legal rules contained in the Uniform Commercial Code. Why is it not a term of art in American law? Because it's foreign to us. Roman civil law is foreign to us. The law merchant is a system that is foreign to us, and a system that we should never be part of, meaning that our bodies should never be in commerce. So, law merchant is a system of customary law that developed in Europe during the Middle Ages and regulated the dealings of mariners and merchants in all the commercial countries of the world until the 17th century. Many of the law merchants' principles, maxims, came to be incorporated into the common law, which in turn formed the basis of the Uniform Commercial Code, also termed commercial law or Lex Mercatoria. So to continue, they will be our chattel, and we will hold the security interest over them forever by operation of the law merchant under the scheme of secured transactions. So what's a scheme? Webster's Dictionary, a plan or program of action, especially a crafty or secret one. What's a secured transaction? Black's Law ninth, a business arrangement by which a buyer or borrower gives collateral to the seller or lender to guarantee payment of an obligation. Article 9 of the UCC deals with secured transactions. See security agreement. Secured, Black's Law 9th, adjective. 1875. 1. Of a debt or obligation supported or backed by security or collateral. Of a creditor, protected by a pledge, mortgage, or other encumbrance of property that helps ensure financial soundness and confidence. See security. So again, what is it secured by? It's secured by a pledge. What are they doing? It's under the scheme of secured transactions and the ancient system of pledging, right? So, what's a transaction? Black's Law 9th, noun. The act or an instance of conducting business or other dealings, especially the formation, performance, or discharge of a contract. 2. Something performed or carried out, a business agreement or exchange. 3. Any activity involving two or more persons. Under the Roman civil law, an agreement that is intended by the parties to prevent or end a dispute and in which they make reciprocal concessions. Next. Americans, by unknowingly or unwittingly delivering the bills of lading to us, will be rendered bankrupt and insolvent, forever to remain economic slaves through taxation, secured by their pledges. So, delivering, bills of lading. Delivery, Bouvier's Law Dictionary, conveyancing. 1. The transferring of a deed from the grantor to the grantee in such a manner as to deprive him of the right to recall it. 2. As to the form, the delivery may be by words without acts, as if the deed be lying upon a table, and the grantor says to the grantee, "Take that as my deed." It will be a sufficient delivery. Or it may be by acts without words, and therefore a dumb man may deliver a deed. So they're saying, if you put something on a table, and you, what's called tabling it, and they take it, it doesn't even necessarily mean that you even understood what it was. And if you think about it, from the standpoint of the birth certificate contract, you as a baby do not understand what's going on at that time. But you're still being what? You're still being delivered. 3. A delivery may either be absolute when it is delivered to the grantor himself, or it may be conditional, that is, to a third person to keep until some condition shall have been performed by the grantee. And then it is called an escrow. So some condition shall have been performed by the grantee? Right, like claiming your estate back. So what's a bill, or bill of lading? Bill, mercantile law, an account containing the items of goods sold, or of work done by one person against another. A bill is made out by the creditor alone. Bill of lading, Bouvier's Law Dictionary, contracts and commercial law. A memorandum or acknowledgement in writing signed by the captain or master of a ship or other vessel that he has received in good order on board of his ship, right, his ship of state, or vessel therein named, at the place therein mentioned, certain goods therein specified, which he promises to deliver in like good order, the dangers of the seas excepted, at the place therein appointed for the delivery of the same, to the consignee therein named, or to his assigns, he or they paying freight for the same. Now, there have been some people who have had a theory that it might possibly be the situation where we are being transported, if you will, delivered across state lines, across boundary lines. And so therefore, what they felt they should do, and I never did actually find out what the outcome of this was, but if you look in Article 1, Section 9 of the Constitution of the United States of America, the idea of the migration or importation of such persons requires a $10 tax, basically an excise tax. What they were thinking was that they had to pay the $10 excise tax and then they could literally claim themselves back. It's an interesting thought, but we get far more into detail into claiming the estate under the common law with the vocational science of freedom. But I thought it was interesting to make note of here. So Americans by unknowingly or unwittingly delivering the bills of lading to us will be rendered bankrupt and insolvent, forever to remain economic slaves through taxation, secured by their pledges. So, rendered bankrupt, render. Bouvier's Law Dictionary, to yield, to return, to give again. It is the reverse of perrender. Perrender. To take. This word is used to signify the right of taking a thing before it is offered. Hence the phrase of law, it lies in render, but not perrender. So what I suggest, and before I did this, I never knew that term before. So what we should be doing is we should perrender our estates, meaning take it back before it's offered, because they're never going to offer them back to us. We need to simply take them. Bankrupt. So it would be rendered bankrupt, right? So Bouvier's Law Dictionary, a person who has done or suffered some act to be done, which is by law declared an act of bankruptcy. In such case, he may be declared a bankrupt. It is proper to notice that there is much difference between a bankrupt and an insolvent. But they're saying in the quote here that we will be rendered bankrupt and insolvent. So that is eventually able. All right, so a man may be a bankrupt and yet be perfectly solvent. That is eventually able to pay all of his debts, or he may be insolvent. And in consequence of not having done or suffered an act of bankruptcy, he may not be bankrupt. Again, the bankrupt laws are intended to secure creditors from waste, extravagance, and mismanagement by seizing the property out of the hands of the debtors and placing it into the custody of the law, meaning the bankruptcy court. Whereas the insolvent laws only relieve a man from imprisonment for debt after he has assigned his property for the benefit of his creditors. Both under bankruptcy and insolvent laws, the debtor is required to surrender his property for the benefit of his creditors. Bankrupt laws discharge the person from imprisonment and his property acquired after his discharge from all liabilities for his debts. Insolvent laws simply discharge the debtor from imprisonment or liability to be imprisoned, but his after acquiring property may be taken in satisfaction of his former debts. So they're saying that we will be rendered bankrupt and insolvent. If you register every single piece of your property and you're only given a privilege to use it as what's called a usufructuary, so you become the usufructuary and they allow you by privilege to use it, are you not bankrupt and insolvent? Yes, because you have no money. You don't have any gold and silver. You don't have any title to anything because your titles have been basically given over by registry. You don't hold a lodial title because most likely, in all likelihood, your land had already been registered at some point in time under the Torrens registry system, which we'll get to later. But the point is, they've done a pretty good job of making us all bankrupt and insolvent already. Next. Forever to remain economic slaves through taxation secured by their pledges. What's a slave? A person who has illegal property of another and forced to obey him. A person who is excessively dependent upon or controlled by something. Is everybody who registers their property excessively dependent or controlled by something? Yes, they are. Because what is the first thing that the cop asks you for when he pulls you over on the side of the road? License and what? Registration, please. Why does he want the registration? He has to prove that that car is not your property, that it's been registered to the state, and so therefore he can then act. Or she, depending on the situation. But that's why they ask that. License and registration, right? They have to know that they can act. And that's what they've done, or that's what you've done by being a slave. You've ended up registering something, and so therefore you're controlled by them when they ask you for that registration. Okay, so what's secured mean? Securitize, Black's Law 9th verb. To convert assets into negotiable securities for resale in the financial market, allowing the issuing financial institution to remove assets from its books and thereby improve its capital ratio and liquidity to make new loans with the security proceeds if it so chooses. Securitized, adjective securitization. This gets into the aspect of the dual bookkeeping entry system, which I won't elaborate on here, but just to say the point, make the point that in their system, every debt is an asset and every asset is a debt. That's how they're working this. And it came from the Venetian black nobility, but I'll just leave it at that for now. So, what's a secured transaction? Black's Law 9th, a business arrangement by which a buyer or borrower gives collateral to the seller or lender to guarantee payment of an obligation. Article 9 of the UCC deals with secured transactions. This is what they're doing. They're taking the registration of the child and then they're creating what? They're creating a birth certificate. A certificate. And it is a secured transaction. It is a security. And you can, it's obvious because the thing is printed on bond paper. But even if it weren't so obvious, the fact is that there is a fidelity bond connected to your birth certificate, showing the amount of which you are pledged, or that perhaps your estate is worth, but we'll get there in a minute. So a pledge, again, Bouvier's Law Dictionary contract, he who becomes security for another, and in this sense, everyone who becomes bail for another is a pledge, as previously stated. Next, they will be stripped of their rights and given a commercial value designed to make us a profit, and they will be none the wiser. What does strip mean? A noun. Black's Law 9th, the act of separating and selling a bonds, coupons, and corpus separately. The act of a tenant who, holding less than the entire fee in land, spoils or unlawfully takes something from the land. Stripped. Strip, from Webster's, transitive verb, to remove clothing, covering, or surface matter from. To deprive of possessions. To divest of honors, privileges, or functions. So you'll be stripped of your rights and given a commercial value, the amount a willing buyer would pay for a willing seller in an unregulated market. It is important to note here that there is a fidelity bond connected to your birth certificate, and the amount of the bond can be found by having an audit done on your birth certificate by someone with a Bloomberg terminal. This is the amount of your estate is bonded for and could be considered your commercial value, as the bond is a negotiable instrument and is in your estate name. And that is your birth certificate. So the connection of the two financial instruments are connected. Now, what's a profit? So those things are going to make them a profit. Black's Law 9th, the excess of revenues over expenditures in a business transaction. Gain, earnings, income. So when they create all of this fiat currency off of these pledges, they're using you as collateral, and that is an aspect of your commercial value. To continue, they will be stripped of their rights and given a commercial value designed to make us a profit, while they will be none the wiser, for not one man in a million could ever figure out their plans, and if by accident one or two would figure it out, we have in our arsenal plausible deniability. Plausible deniability is the ability to deny any involvement in legal or unethical activities because there is no clear evidence to prove involvement. The lack of evidence makes the denial credible or plausible. The use of the tactic implies forethought, such as intentionally setting up the conditions to plausibly avoid responsibility for one's future actions. So in and there and of itself, truly there is no such thing as plausible deniability, because if you intentionally set up the conditions, then you already knew that that's what you were going to be doing, or that you were going to be doing something that would be unlawful and that you would want to later be able to deny it. The term is used both in law and in politics. In politics, plausible deniability usually applies to the practice of keeping the leadership of a large organization uninformed about illicit actions that the organization is carrying out. The leaders then have plausible deniability if they are ever questioned about those illicit actions. In other words, they truly don't know about any illegal actions, and so they are automatically presumed clear of blame. And as Tricky Dick once said, the important thing is that we maintain plausible deniability. Right. Next. After all, this is the only logical way to fund government. by floating liens and debt to the registrants in the form of benefits and privileges. What is government? The word government actually means mind control. It is etymologically originated from Latin. It splits into two words, governare, meaning to control, and mens or mentis, meaning mind. So government means to control the mind. Floating liens. What's a floater? This is from the banking dictionary, a term used to signify the first class of bearer securities. An example, exchequer bonds, treasury bills, etc., which bill brokers deposit with banks against money lent to them at call. When the money is called in by one bank, the broker must borrow from another, and thus his securities move or float about from one bank to another. Again, this is the aspect of the dual bookkeeping entry system, and I know it's confusing as hell, but this is what they're doing. Floating debt. Again, this is the Banker's Dictionary. The floating debt of the country consists of treasury bills and exchequer bonds. See, funded debt. So that's what they're talking about. After all, this is the only logical way to fund government, by floating liens and debt to the registrants, right? So they're floating this dual bookkeeping entry garbage to us, to the registrants, because you've registered your children and property in the form of benefits and privileges. So you're going to have a benefit being able to, or benefit and privilege to be able to then use the property. So what's a lien? Lien, in Bouvier's Law Dictionary, contracts, in its most extensively signification, the term includes every case in which real or personal property is charged with the payment of a debt or duty, every such charge being denominated a lien on the property. In a more limited sense, it is defined to be a right of detaining the property of another until some claim be satisfied. So, some claim be satisfied. So what's the claim? The claim is that you owe a debt, but it's not actually your debt. It's Congress's debt. And Congress is the one that owes the debt, not you. But they're going to lien it upon you instead. So that's the term. So it's a lien, a contract. Real personal property is charged with the payment of any debt or duty. So they're saying you've been registered, the states put you up as collateral to the feds, basically to Congress, to pay for the loans that they take from the Federal Reserve because they were bankrupt. So, debt. Black's Law 9th. Liability on a claim. A specific sum of money due by agreement or otherwise the debt amounted to, and this is an example again, the greater and less than symbols. The debt amounted to $2,500. 2. The aggregate of all existing claims against the person, entity, or state. 3. A non-monetary thing that one person owes another, such as goods or services. Her debt was one cow to him. A common law, number 4, a common law writ by which a court adjudicates claim involving fixed sums of money. As in, he brought suit in debt, also termed writ of debt. Bonded debt, Black's Law 9th. A debt secured by a bond, a business or government debt, represented by issued bonds. Registrant, Black's Law 7th. One who registers, especially one who registers something for the purpose of securing a right or privilege, granted by law upon official registration. Securing a right or privilege, right, because that's the registrant, upon official registration. What's a benefit? Bouvier's Law Dictionary, this word is used in the same sense as gain and profits. What's a beneficiary? Beneficiary, this term is frequently used as synonymous with the technical phrase cestui que trust. That is out of Bouvier's Law Dictionary. So, if you are a beneficiary, it says right there, it is used as synonymous with the technical phrase cestui que trust. If you are taking a benefit or privilege from these Luciferian scum, You have placed yourself in a trust, in an aspect of a trust. You are the Sesquique Trust. And if you want more information about what the Sesquique Trust is, go read the Sesquique Vi Act of 1666. Now, it is, of course, English law, but it is very interesting as to what they did. Because after they burned London to the ground, they came up with this law that said, well, if you don't come forward and prove that you're living, well, the crown is going to administer all of your property. So you have to prove that you've been found to be living, which is also something that we take care of with the Vocational Science of Freedom by doing a proper proof of life and proof of age inquest done by a judicial coroner. To continue, privilege, again, rights. This word taken its active sense is a particular law, a particular disposition of the law, which grants certain special prerogatives to some person contrary to common right, as we said before. So, let us recap where we're at, and let us see what we understand now about this quote. Very soon, every American will be required to register their biological property in a national system designed to keep track of the people, and that will operate under the ancient system of pledging. By such methodology, we can compel people to submit to our agenda, which will affect our security as a chargeback for our fiat paper currency. Every American will be forced to register or suffer, not being able to work and earn a living. They will be our chattel, and we will hold the security interest over them forever by operation of the law merchant under the scheme of secured transactions. Americans, by unknowingly or unwittingly delivering the bills of lading to us, will be rendered bankrupt and insolvent, forever to remain economic slaves through taxation, secured by their pledges. They will be stripped of their rights and given a commercial value designed to make us a profit, and they will be none the wiser, for not one man in a million could ever figure out our plans. And if by accident one or two would figure it out, we have in our arsenal plausible deniability. After all, this is the only logical way to fund government, by floating liens and debt to the registrants in the form of benefits and privileges. So as we continue on, this will inevitably reap us huge profits beyond our wildest expectations and leave every American a contributor to this fraud, which we will call social insurance. What's a fraud? Bouvier's Law Dictionary: contracts, torts. Any trick or artifice employed by one person to induce another to fall into an error, or to detain him in it, so that he may make an agreement contrary to his interest. Right, like shoving a birth certificate contract in front of a mother who just gave birth and isn't quite in her right mind at the moment, and say, here, sign this. Or to come at you and say, it is a law that says you must register your car. Really? A law? Oh, you mean a statute? Oh, so you're just telling me I have to. So you're saying you're going to, what? Punish me for not entering into a contract with you? I'm pretty sure that violates all the constitutions, and where it states that there shall be no law passed abrogating the right of contract, meaning the right to enter it or not enter into it. But I digress. To continue, the fraud may consist either, first, in the misrepresentation, or secondly, in the concealment of material fact. Fraud, force, and vexation are odious in law. Did they ever tell you what they were going to do? Did they ever tell you what the totality of this contract meant? No. Did they ever tell you that signing up for Social Security turned you into federal personnel? No. They just put it into their statutes and say, well, we gave you notice. Well, who's going to read 10,000, well, it's actually a lot more than 10,000 pages of the U.S. Code to figure this all out? Nobody. The point is, if they're offering you something, you don't want it. And you never want to register anything with them, because then they control it. So 2, frauds. Fraud voids a contract. Ab initio, which means from the beginning. Both at law and in equity, whether the object be to deceive the public or third persons, or one party endeavor thereby to cheat the other. Social insurance then became named Social Security. So you have entered into a contract for Social Security, you are considered to be federal personnel. Did they ever give you full aspect of the material facts of that? Did they conceal that fact? And the answer is yes. So therefore it's fraud. To continue. Without realizing it, every American will insure us for any loss we may incur, and in this manner, every American will unknowingly be our servant, however begrudgingly. Insured, Bouvier's law. Contracts. The person who procures an insurance on his property. 2. It is the duty of the insured to pay the premium and to represent fully and fairly all the circumstances relating to the subject matter of the insurance, which may influence the determination of the underwriters in undertaking the risk or estimating the premium. A concealment of such facts amounts to fraud, which voids the contract. Insurer contracts. One who has obligated himself to insure the safety of another's property, in consideration of a premium paid or secured to be paid to him. It is his duty to pay any loss which has arisen on the property insured. So, when you go along and you damage your own body, they're saying, hey, that's not your property. You got to pay damages for that. Or the very idea of life insurance in and of itself, that you can insure your productive value. Well, if you have entered into a life insurance contract, all insurance contracts are adjudicated in admiralty. They're all maritime admiralty contracts, every single one of them. And I can prove that 7 ways to Sunday, but just trust me on that one. We'll leave it at that. So that's why they want you to have insurance on your car, life insurance, insurance on your home, all this other stuff, right? Because they want you to pay the premium in case their property gets damaged that you've registered. So, based on this, our estates are bonded at fidelity. If we then are seen to cause a loss to our own productive value, we then have to pay them for that loss. This is basically how we are insuring them. And again, these are the fines and the fees that we end up paying to them of the aspect of breaking or violating some sort of Roman civil law, statute, act, ordinance, or code, right? That then says, well, you weren't supposed to do that. Daddy didn't give you the permission to ever use it in that way. So, next up. So what does servant mean? Americans will unknowingly be our servant, however begrudgingly. So, servant means, from Black's Law 9th, a person who is employed by another to do work under the control and direction of the employer. A servant, such as a full-time employee, provides personal services that are integral to an employer's business. So a servant must submit to the employer's control of the servant's time and behavior. But the word servant in our legal nomenclature has a broad significance and embraces all persons of whatever rank or position who are in the employ and subject to the direction or control of another in any department of labor or business. Department of Labor, right? Indeed, it may, in most cases, be said to be synonymous with employee. And this is from Wood, a treatise on the law of master and servant, which is why you should always read the treatise on a subject if you really want to fully understand what the hell is going on. So, what's a servant? It's synonymous with employee. And if you're all considered to be federal personnel, what did it say? You have to provide, the servant must submit to the employer's control of the servant's time and behavior. Very interesting. I didn't know that until I actually looked this up, and I found that to be fairly shocking. Okay, what does submit then mean? Submission. Bouvier's Law Dictionary, a yielding to authority. A citizen is bound to submit to the laws. By the way, we are people. A citizen of the United States, yes, they are subject to the jurisdiction of Congress under the 14th Amendment. But that's the point. We are people, not United States citizens. To continue, a child to his parents, a servant to his master. A victor may enforce the submission of his enemy. So what happened after the Civil War? All the southern states were considered to be conquered territories, right? So what do they have to do? Submit. 2. Under submission, when a captor has taken a prize and the vanquished have submitted to his authority, the property, as between the belligerents, has been transferred. When there is complete possession on one side and submission upon the other, the capture is complete. What if we don't submit? What if we say, no, that's ours. You can't have that. And no, I didn't register that. My parents did. And because I was an infant at the time, the contract is void. Which is exactly what we're doing. So, the people will become helpless and without any hope for their redemption. What's redemption? Bouvier's Law Dictionary: contracts, the act of taking back by the seller from the buyer a thing which had been sold subject to the right of repurchase. 2. The right of redemption then is an agreement by which the seller reserves to himself the power of taking back the thing sold by returning the price paid for it, as to the fund out of which a mortgaged estate is to be redeemed. See payment. vd equity of redemption. Employ, Webster, to make use of someone or something. Dummy corporation. 28 U.S.C. 3002-15A is all I need to point you at. It says right in the U.S. Code, the United States means a federal corporation. What's a plot? Webster's: to plan or contrive especially, secretly. The Luciferian bankers, globalists, have been plotting to take back America from the very moment that they lost it. To make a point, now that we've field stripped this whole entire quote down, let's read the whole thing again and feel out what this actually says. Very soon, every American would be required to register their biological property in a national system designed to keep track of the people, and that will operate under the ancient system of pledging. By such methodology, we can compel people to submit to our agenda, which will affect our security as a chargeback for our fiat paper currency. Every American will be forced to register or suffer not being able to work and earn a living. They will be our chattel, and we will hold the security interest over them forever by operation of the law merchant under the scheme of secured transactions. Americans, by unknowingly or unwittingly delivering the bills of lading to us, will be rendered bankrupt and insolvent, forever to remain economic slaves through taxation, secured by their pledges. They will be stripped of their rights and given a commercial value designed to make us a profit. And they will be none the wiser, for not one man in a million could ever figure out our plans. And if by accident one or two could figure it out, we have in our arsenal plausible deniability. After all, this is the only logical way to fund government. But mind control. By floating liens and debt to the registrants in the form of benefits and privileges. This will inevitably reap us huge profits beyond our wildest expectations and leave every American a contributor to this fraud, which we will call social insurance. Without realizing it, every American will insure us for any loss we may incur, and in this manner, every American will unknowingly be our servant, however begrudgingly. People will become helpless and without any hope for their redemption, and we will employ the high office of the president of our dummy corporation to foment this plot against America. Now that you see what's going on, let's elaborate a little bit on some other aspects of this plot. Their agenda and plot then and now. I made just a little comparison here as to what's going on now as to what they did to the English people in 1066 when William the Conqueror came over. So, to make a comparison here, what they wanted in England after they won in 1066 was to force everyone to register their lands in what was called the Doomsday Book. No, that's not a joke. You can go look that up. So what did they want back in America after they lost in 1776? Well, they wanted to force everyone to eventually register their lands in what is now known as the Torrens registry system. This is the same Roman law, filthy registry system that you can equate directly to the Doomsday Book all the way back in 1066. It's no different. What did they want to do in 1066? They wanted to remove self-governance by removing the 100 Court. The 100 Court was the predecessor, if you will, of what we now think of as a grand jury. The 100 Court was basically made up of 100 families in an area or a shire. And it was a self-governing mechanism where the leaders of the families got together and they decided matters regarding the whole shire or the whole area, what they should do, if they should punish someone, so on and so forth. And what did they want to get rid of? You know, what they lost in 1776? They wanted to remove self-governance by removing true grand juries, meaning grand juries that are made up of 25 or more people, meaning sovereign people, members of the peerage, because that's what a peer is. It means a member of the sovereignty. You will never find a grand jury over 24 members in America anywhere, period, unless we create one. All of the statutory, quote-unquote, grand juries are not grand juries at all. They are only advisory juries. And so they have removed our fourth branch of government, which is above all government, the grand jury. So what did they want back then? They were subjecting people to spiritual courts. William the Conqueror separated he separated the spiritual and the temporal courts. So he gave the cult of Rome, the priests of El, their own courts, of which they ran probate out of, meaning to deal with the property of the dead. So what are they doing now after they lost in 1776, or what are they subjecting us to? They're subjecting the people to inferior Roman civil law courts, meaning statutes, acts, ordinances, and codes. Not common law, not actual damage, harm, loss, or injury, but thou shalt not because we say so. What were they doing then? They were forcing people to pay a fee to claim their inheritance. You had to pay a fee or an amount of money to the king in order to have your estate and titles from your father. What are they doing now? They're never giving us a remedy at all to claim the abandoned estates. They have completely occulted any knowledge of what that remedy is, what it was, or how to do it at all of it. So this is what we've had to reconstruct at the Vocational Science of Freedom. So some of the other goals and some of the other warnings. So their goal is to steal every bit of gold and silver from the people and replace it with worthless paper. As Jefferson warned, if the American people ever allow private banks to control the issue of their currency, first by inflation and then by deflation, the banks will deprive the people of all property until their children wake up homeless on the continent their fathers conquered. The issuing power should be taken from the banks and restored to the people to whom it properly belongs. Thomas Jefferson, which is exactly what it says in the Constitution for the United States of America under Article 1, Section 10. It says that no state shall make anything but gold and silver in tender payment of debt, and that Congress shall have the only power to issue currency. It doesn't say anywhere in the Constitution that the Congress can give that power to somebody else. It says that we, the people, vested that power to them. Only to them. That's it. They're accountable. So, I'd say it's high time that we take it back. Now, in 1933, they basically stole all of the gold by executive order under the power of emergency war powers. And this is a little look at what they posted on all of the post offices around America. Now, it's not the totality of it, and my apologies because it's a little bit blurry, but it basically says at the top, if you can't read it, Postmaster, please post in a conspicuous place. John A. Farley, Postmaster General. Under executive order of the President, issued April 5th, 1933, all persons are required to deliver on or before May 1st. May 1st, I have to make a point here. May 1st is the absolute highest high Luciferian holiday. There is no holiday higher than May 1st, May Day. And when did they steal all the gold? May 1st. This should tell you, if you're aware of this connection and have a little bit of knowledge of the occult, this right there tells you that they are Luciferian, that they did it on May 1st. There's an absolute reason for that. So, on or before May 1st, 1933, all gold coin, gold bullion, and gold certificates now owned by them to a Federal Reserve Bank, branch, or agency, or to any member bank of the Federal Reserve System. We're going to steal it because we want it. Because we're bankrupt, and we are going to make sure that the Luciferian bankers have everything. Now, there are some other people that have warned us about what they're doing. One of them is JFK. There is a plot in this country to enslave every man, woman, and child. Before I leave this high and noble office, I intend to expose this plot. What is the plot he's talking about? It was everything we just described. It is the registration of the children. It is the enslavement to the Luciferian banking cartel. And it is the forced registration of all of your property and the administration of your estate until you're dead because you never come back and claim it. So, the plot being perpetuated by the traitors of the Republic is what we have to focus on. And the importance of understanding a traitor is very, very poignant. As Marcus Cicero once pointed out in Rome, a nation can survive its fools and even the ambitious, but it cannot survive treason from within. An enemy at the gates is less formidable, for he is known and carries his banner openly. But the traitor moves amongst those within the gate freely, his sly whispers rustling through all the alleys, heard in the very halls of government itself. James Madison said this: I believe there are more instances of the abridgment of freedom of the people by gradual and silent encroachments by those in power than by violent and sudden usurpations. He's talking about the aspect of that they do everything slowly. If they hit you with everything at once, you'd know what would happen, and it would be, again, like the boiling of the frog analogy, that you can't throw a frog, if you want to cook a frog, you can't throw a frog directly into boiling hot water. It will jump out. However, if you put a live frog in lukewarm water and then you slowly turn up the heat, the frog will stay in the pot, not knowing that it is actually getting boiled. So, a few examples of this plot of the slow destruction of America are the following. In 2012, the entire mainstream media was allowed to be weaponized against all of you. The Broadcasting Board of Governors is part of the CIA and is fully run by them, in case anyone doesn't know that. They determine what you hear and what you learn on the manipulation of what's called television programming. Because the Luciferian communists are hell-bent on the complete destruction of America. And this allows them to continue to do that. Because before this, they weren't allowed to use domestic propaganda. But now they are. So, throw away your TV. Do not get any bit of your news from any mainstream media. I don't care where it comes from. Another example of the slow boiling of the frog is this asshole. So, the Luciferian communists, hell-bent on destroying all of America, want to do it slowly. This is Benjamin Netanyahu. In 1990, this is a quote that was recorded out of a Mossad hangout when he was employed at the time as a Soviet agent at Fink's Bar. And it was recorded and it was 100% authenticated. And this was published by Gordon Duff at Veterans Today. So he said, America is a golden calf and we will suck it dry, chop it up and sell it off piece by piece until there is nothing left but the world's biggest welfare state that we will control and we will create and control. This is what we do to countries we hate. We slowly destroy them, or we destroy them very slowly, sorry. So, the boiling the frog, they're going to do it all at once? No. And here he is showing the satanic sign of 666 at that meeting. This is what these people are. This is what they're doing. This is their agenda. And they're never, ever going to stop unless we stop them. So on that point, at some point, you'll have to stop running and take a stand. Either you, your children, or your grandchildren. Better you than them. And how do you do that? Well, good old Sam, one of the greatest revolutionaries of the American Revolution, said, "It does not take a majority to prevail, but rather an irate, tireless minority, keen on setting brush fires of freedom in the minds of men. So how do we go about setting brush fires in the minds of men? You help promote and teach. You do it by learning, teaching, and promoting the truth at every turn until your enemy is defeated. So, please continue learning at the Vocational Science of Freedom and pass on this knowledge that you have learned by sharing this and other lectures that empower you to take action. You can visit the Vocational Science of Freedom on both Odyssey and on YouTube. And I highly suggest that you go to Odyssey and watch the specific playlists: The Truth of the System, the VSOF Timeline Class, Lies and Thievery of 4,000 Years, the VSOF Banking Timeline, and then go to YouTube and go to the playlists and watch The Correction of Your American Status and VSOF Paperwork, so that you can then learn how to remove yourself from this system of slavery, step by step, in a process that works. Now, the class outline for the presentation tonight, as well as the mega links for all the other videos and documents, can also be found on the Vocational Science Freedom Gilded server, as always. And so with that, I thank you all for coming. I thank you all for learning tonight. I hope all of you have a wonderful rest of your week. And I thank you for listening. And until next time, stay safe and stay sovereign.